Good evening, everybody. My name's Dr. Lex Mauger. I'm a reader in exercise physiology, and I'm a director of research and innovation in the School of Sport and Exercise Sciences, which is based in the University of Kent. Now, I want to say a big thank you to all of you for joining me this evening for this talk. I think it's really good because doing public lectures, particularly to people who might be our prospective students, is a really fun part of my job, because I often get asked lots of questions that don't normally come up in lectures to students and also to other academics when I'm presenting at conferences. So this is a really fun part of my job, and I really enjoy doing it. This is also timed really well as a talk because the university has just announced its signature research themes, which are part of a whole university strategy to further develop its global research profile. Now, the signature themes bring together a wide range of ideas and approaches through cross-disciplinary collaboration, and they highlight the cutting edge and innovative research that goes on at Kent. Now, this initiative and strategy is also going to have a really big impact both on what we teach and the way that we teach it. So our signature themes are not just about our research, but about our teaching too. What's really exciting, I think, is that the research that we do and the teaching that we do in the School of Sport and Exercise Sciences has formed a key pillar for one of the university's signature research themes. And this particular theme is called Future Human. So in my talk today, I'm going to go through and give you some insights into how sport and exercise science can help us understand a bit more about future human. Now, to do this, I'm going to give you a quick overview of what the Future Human signature theme is all about and what kind of topic areas it covers. And after that, I'll talk briefly about what sport and exercise science is and what scientific fields that includes. Now, from there, what I'll do is give you some examples of the sort of studies that we've conducted here in the School of Sport and Exercise Sciences, and how those fit under the umbrella of the Future Human signature theme. So hopefully that'll give you a bit of a flavour of the sort of research that goes on within the School of Sport and Exercise Sciences, and also how this feeds into the teaching of the curriculum that we deliver. Now, to make things a bit more interesting, as if the lecture wasn't interesting enough already, the whole lecture is interactive. So dotted throughout the presentation are questions which I would really value and I'll be really interested to hear your views on. So I'm going to be running this through a piece of software called Ombia, which is going to allow you to respond to these questions in real time. And when you respond to the questions, your answer, the audience response, is going to appear on the slide in real time as well. So hopefully it'll be an interesting way to see how the audience feels about the question that I present. So there's going to be 4 or 5 different questions which pop up during the presentation. You'll get 20 seconds or so to record your answer. Now, if this is something that you want to engage with and be involved with, you're going to need to either have your phone with you, or you're going to need to have a separate window open on your computer if this is how you're logging into the session. And on your phone or in your internet browser on your computer, if you go to the web address ra.ombia.com, so this web address here, so type that into your web browser, and once you're in that web browser, it's going to prompt you to have a session ID. So if you type in the session ID 588221, what that will do is it'll log you into this particular presentation, so that when I ask a question and that pops up on the screen, you will be able to answer that question by responding on your phone or on your tablet or on your computer. Okay, so what you need to do here is go to ra.ombia.com, log in with the session ID 588221, and it will hopefully allow you to interactively engage with the presentation this evening. Obviously, that's not compulsory. It's completely up to you. But if we can get a few people responding to that, hopefully it'll make things a bit more fun. So on to the main part of the presentation then. So the Future Human signature research theme is all about furthering our understanding of how science and technology can be used for human enhancement and the wide-ranging consequences this will have in the world in which we live. So we define human enhancement or augmentation as an intervention that's designed or used to restore or improve human performance, therefore overcoming the limits of one's human body or mind. Now, discussions in this area usually focus on pushing the boundaries of performance for the elite. So, for example, an elite sporting population where we try and improve their physical or their cognitive performance. But importantly, when we're talking about human enhancement or augmentation, we also mean restoration of impaired function as well. So back to normal or average levels. So when we think about this, we think about using technology or engineering or pharmacology perhaps to enhance human functions. And in this kind of vein, I guess we tend to think about perhaps superheroes or comic books or films or TV, where we have characters who have improved strength or sensory perception or memories or intelligence or reaction time. And that might seem a bit far-fetched and a bit too fictional for reality, but looking at superheroes and science fiction to explore human augmentation really isn't as crazy as it sounds. And indeed, there's lots of different examples where reality really isn't too far from the fiction that we see on TV or in the cinema. Now, the synergies between the different disciplines like physiology and psychology and engineering and artificial intelligence and data science are pretty obvious perhaps in how they could produce seemingly futuristic human enhancement. But it really only reflects part of a very complex process which defines whether these interventions could actually become mainstream or not. So the whole purpose of a signature research theme, Future Human, is really also about considering how human enhancement might change the world in which we live. So if we take the example of a strength-enhancing prosthetic limb or a drug that boosts cognitive function as an example here, think about the science and technology which underpins that, but also think about the legal implications for allowing the public use of this. How might these be regulated, or even would we want to regulate them? How could it change the productivity in the workplace? Would it be compulsory for them to use that, or would they have a choice in doing so? How might it affect the way that we perceive each other, or how we might be attracted to each other? So there's lots behind this, and there's lots of different fields that it includes. And I realize that it all sounds perhaps a little bit out there, and that I'm talking about things that you think might never happen. So I want to give you an example that's happened in my lifetime, but I think relates to this. And it's about mobile phones. Now, I'm not all that old, but I got my first mobile phone when I was a teenager. It was called a Philips Savvy, or a Philips C12, and it allowed me to store a grand total of 10 text messages. So I could have 10 text messages on that phone before the storage ran out and I had to delete some before I could receive another message. It had an aerial at the top that you could unscrew and screw back on, and it had a massive battery in the back, which meant that the phone lasted for a full 5 days before I'd have to recharge it. But essentially, all I could use that phone for was phone calls and text messages. As a teenager, that was absolutely revolutionary in comparison to what I'd had access to before. It allowed me to text my girlfriend. I could call my parents and ask them to pick me up from football if it finished early, or I could go out and meet my friends and I could change the location we were going to meet without having to rely on finding a landline and hoping my friends were already at home and hadn't left the house yet. So the freedom and the form in which I was able to communicate using a mobile phone was completely different to what I had access to before 2000, when I had that mobile phone. So that transition was incredibly different in a very short space of time. But now consider the next 20 years. Compare my Philips C12 that I had back in the year 2000 and compare it to what a modern smartphone can do and what it allows you to do, I would suggest really that probably text messages and phone calls are probably the things that you use your phone for the least. So even on my old iPhone that I have in front of me now, I can check my emails, I can read the news, I can see how many steps I've done today, I can check Twitter, look at the weather, I could watch iPlayer or download a podcast, or I could listen to a presentation on Zoom. Now, for the me of 20 years ago, those were probably things that I wouldn't be particularly interested in. But even still, 20 years ago, for me to imagine that kind of functionality on a mobile phone that everybody pretty much in the whole world would have was completely unthinkable. It was something that I would never have thought would have been possible. So now what I'd like you to think of as an audience is think about how every single part of your life is affected by a mobile phone, how you use it in everyday life, how different companies use it, how businesses use it, how the NHS uses it, and what would happen if that were to be taken away. So if mobile phones suddenly didn't exist, how would life change? And I would suggest probably everyday life as you know it would probably collapse. So what's happened over the last 20 to 30 years in terms of mobile technology has been absolutely phenomenal. And what I'd like you to think about is, in our lifetime, I think we will probably see similar life-changing technologies which enhance human function or allow humans to be augmented in some way. And really, when we're talking about future human and the research and the study behind this signature theme, this is really what we're talking about. We're talking about new technology which enhances human capability and the impact this is going to have on our everyday lives. So the scope of future human is really pretty massive, because it's not just about science and technology, but it's also about understanding the different areas of life that this is going to affect. So to recognize this, the signature theme, future human, is split into 4 areas, and they broadly relate to different areas of life. So I'm going to show this here on this slide, and there's basically 4 sub-themes of future human, which comprise of the healthy human, and the everyday human, the working human, and the superhuman. And you can see obviously the different aspects of life that this might feed into. So the main focus of healthy human is basically augmentation that can support us in maintaining a healthy lifestyle or to treat or manage clinical conditions, and how this might change the future of healthcare. And you can see in the box here lots of examples of the type of content we might see in that particular sub-theme. The everyday human focuses on enhancement and augmentation technology for the everyday lives of what we might consider to be the normal person, the average Joe, and the wider societal impact that this everyday access to this technology is going to have. The working human considers the future of work in light of human augmentation and how this might impact people in businesses and organizations. So if you have access to a new human enhancement technology, how's that going to be regulated in the workplace? Will it become compulsory? Will it move people out of work or make work more inclusive? Finally, the superhuman sub-theme is all about identifying what our human limits are, and then understanding the science and technology and the implications of trying to extend these further. So really, what are the limits of human performance, and how can we apply the technology to really further those? So later on in the talk, what I'm going to do is present 4 research projects that I've run in the School of Sport and Exercise Sciences, or that I'm running currently, and then try and show you how these fit into future human and how they link with each of these particular sub-themes. Now, I also want to bring this back to sport and exercise sciences, because that's hopefully why you're all here, and I want to show you why that's relevant. So what is sports science? It's essentially a collection of disciplines which are applied to better understand the scientific principles behind exercise performance. And there's lots of different disciplines in this, and I've got them dotted about the slide here so that you can see. But exercise performance really involves both physical and cognitive aspects. And so sport and exercise science, I think, provides the perfect basis for exploring how science and technology can be used to enhance human function. They can all join together to really better understand this enhancement or restoration of human function, both from a performance but also from a health perspective. Now, I think this is a really exciting time to be studying the subject, because there's really now so much more recognition about how sports science can improve our understanding of human function. And consequently, there's so many more opportunities for people with a background in this area to be able to collaborate with other disciplines, to be able to find jobs in this area, and to really work on very exciting projects. And the next part of my presentation is going to talk through some of those projects which I think links sports science with other disciplines, and how this might help us better understand future human and where this technology might be going in the future. So the first project that I want to talk about is a current collaboration between the School of Sport and Exercise Sciences and the School of Computer Sciences, and a small London-based company called Infotech. Now, Infotech have developed a special kind of sensor that you can print onto a textile material, basically in the same way that you print a logo onto a t-shirt. So it allows you to print this special sensor onto a flexible material. And this sensor is essentially able to detect changes in pressure. So the company have previously used this sensor technology to print buttons onto jackets, for example. So on a ski jacket, you've got a button that will switch your iPod on and off. But what we've been able to do in collaboration with this company is to print this sensor onto a shoe insole, so that this sensor is able to measure someone's walking gait. So it's able to detect the pressure changes in your foot as you walk. Now, this is really important and quite exciting, because there's lots of clinical conditions where walking gait is affected. And if you're able to address this, if you're able to re-educate someone on their walking gait, it can help you manage that clinical condition. If we're looking at athletes on the other side of this, then running gait is really important. So if you have a technology which allows someone to measure their running gait as they run, that could be incredibly helpful for improving their performance, or even avoiding injury. Now, normally, when we want to measure running gait, we need to use particular technology in quite a complex lab setup. And that can be pretty expensive and quite hard to access, certainly for the majority of the population. Also, in this particular setup, you can really only measure someone's gait when they're in the lab. So you've only got their gait measured at that particular time point. Now, the project that we're currently working on would basically allow us to measure someone's gait in real time as they go about their daily lives. They wouldn't have to be in a lab at all. And we'd do this using these pressure sensitive insoles, and then connecting them up with an app which is run on a smartphone. Now, what the app would do is not just measure someone's gait and give you information about those different gait parameters, but it would also notify you when your gait changes, and then what you would need to do in order to correct it back to normal, back to what would be normal for you. Now, the work that we've done on this project so far is basically run a study where we have developed a prototype of the insoles, and then developed some partner software alongside that. And then we did a lab experiment where we got a group of healthy volunteers, and they walked with their insoles in normal conditions. And then what we did is we got them to walk whilst they're in pain, and we induced pain by giving them muscle pain through an injection of hypertonic saline into their thigh, and that induces temporary but fairly intense muscle pain. So we had a condition where those participants were walking in pain, and a condition where they were walking without pain. What we then did is used machine learning and developed an algorithm that was able to detect when that person's gait characteristics changed as a result of the pain that they were in. Now, this is really the first steps of this project, and it's one that we're currently applying for follow-on funding for. If we're successful, then we're hoping to have a market-ready product probably in the next 2 to 3 years. But I think this is a really nice example of how technology can be used to hopefully allow us to better self-manage our health. Now, this leads on to my first question, actually, to the audience. So if you have your response app ready. So my question is whether you think this is a good thing or not. So should we be using technology more to better self-manage our health? So we have a countdown on the screen here going. So if you have logged on to Ombia, you've got 10 seconds to answer this question now. I realize some of you might not have been able to access this at the start of the presentation, so we'll see how many people are doing this at the moment. An overwhelming response to yes. Okay, so it seems like most of us think probably that using technology will be a good way to self-manage our health, and that might allow us to take some of the burden off, the National Health Service, for example, if we're able to use ways to manage our health ourselves a little bit better, and technology might be a good way of doing that. Okay, great. So on to the next project that I'd like to talk about, which is basically whether analgesic drugs, and that's basically painkillers, are performance enhancing. Now, we already know that pain tolerance is important for some sports. So we know, for example, that if you have a high pain tolerance, your endurance performance is going to be better. We also know that there's a very high incidence of use of painkillers in some sports, and that these athletes are taking analgesics, not just to treat injury, but to enhance their performance, because they know if they can use an analgesic drug to improve their pain tolerance or increase their pain tolerance, then their endurance performance is going to be better. Now, a particular drug which has been implicated in this is tramadol. And tramadol is a really strong prescription analgesic, which works in a similar way to morphine. It's also addictive, and it can cause nausea and impair your motor control. It's actually illegal to drive or operate heavy machinery on tramadol. You might have had it before if you've had an operation in the hospital, perhaps, and you were expected to be in a bit of pain afterwards. You might have been prescribed tramadol because it's quite a potent analgesic. But strangely enough, it's actually not currently banned by the World Anti-Doping Agency. So WADA don't ban it because they say there is a lack of scientific evidence to show that it actually enhances performance. And this is despite there being lots of evidence to show that athletes are actually in competition and using this analgesic drug. So to address the problem of the lack of the scientific evidence, we've received funding from WADA to conduct a study which would tell us whether tramadol does enhance performance or not. Now, this study is currently in progress. We're running it in our labs at the moment, which is been a bit of a challenge because we're having to do that in conditions of a pandemic. So you can see actually in this video that the research assistants who are working on this project for me have got full PPE on. They've got respirator masks, visors, gloves, aprons, everything going on to make this as safe as we can. But despite it being done in a challenging environment, we've been able to recruit some of the best cyclists across Kent and the Southeast to participate in this research. And one of these riders, actually, you can see in this video, is actually vlogging about their experience of the research on YouTube. So this guy here is actually a current participant, and this is a video of one of the conditions that he's doing. You can see he's having a bit of a torrid time. Now, in this study, to assess whether tramadol is actually performance enhancing, our participants visit the lab on 3 occasions. So on the first visit, they do something called a VO2 max test, which is basically incremental cycling to exhaustion, and that allows us to assess their maximal oxygen uptake and their riding performance. On the second and the third visit to the lab, they complete a 30-minute ride at a fixed individual intensity, and that's really tough, really hard ride, but it's not exhaustive. They then move straight into a 25-mile time trial, and they have to complete that as quickly as they can. Now, the combination of these 2 types of exercise basically creates similar kind of physiological response that you might expect to see in a much longer race. So, for example, a stage on a Tour de France, it's pretty horrible. You can see that this guy is struggling a little bit towards the end. Now, they do this on separate days, and they either do it with tramadol or with a placebo. And they do it in what's called a double-blind, counterbalanced experimental design. And what this means is that the participant doesn't know whether they're taking a placebo or tramadol. And also the people giving them that intervention, they don't know, the researchers don't know whether they're taking placebo or tramadol. So that's a really tight, robust experimental design. So we're finishing that study in the spring, and the results are going to be sent to WADA, and they're going to use them basically to decide or help them decide whether tramadol should be banned for use in competition, and if it should be moved from the monitoring program, which it is currently here, which means that it's not banned, whether it should be moved on to their prohibited list. Now, for WADA to add a substance or a method to the prohibited list, so for banning it for use in sport, they suggest that it has to fulfill 2 of 3 criteria. So that criteria are whether it improves performance, whether it presents a risk to health, or whether it violates the spirit of the sport, which basically means whether it's ethically dubious or not. So this moves on to my next question, which is, if we can move the screen along, let's try. Should pain-killing drugs be banned for use in sport? So what are your views on this? Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I wasn't necessarily expecting that. I mean, obviously, there's an argument to say that sports people get injured more, and as a result, they have to compete when they're in pain, and they might then need to have an analgesic drug in order to treat that injury, perhaps. I guess the counterpoint to that would be, if you're injured, you shouldn't be competing anyway, and you shouldn't need an analgesic drug in order for you to compete. So it's interesting to see that's the audience perspective on that. Okay, so on to the next project that we've run at Kent. And this project is basically a collaboration between the School of Sport and Exercise Sciences and researchers in digital engineering, so our School of Engineering and Digital Arts. Now, we know that exercise can be boring, it can be unpleasant, and that as a group, it can be social, but it's not always easy to exercise in a group, particularly for some populations. But we know that regular exercise has enormous benefit, both for our physical and our mental health. So what if we were able to increase the number of people who regularly exercise by breaking down some of these barriers which might stop them from exercising? Now, linking virtual reality and exercise has the potential to do this. It can make exercise more fun, perhaps. It might be able to make it less uncomfortable, and it might be able to make it more social as well. So in a series of studies, what we tried to do was to basically see whether we could use a virtual reality setup combined with exercise to make exercise less uncomfortable to perform. So basically less unpleasant when you're exercising hard. Now, one of the benefits of VR, or one of the cool things that you can do, is you can basically change what people see and what they expect to happen. So in this particular study, what we did is we got participants to basically hold a dumbbell in a bicep curl position, and they did that for as long as they could, and we measured their effort that they had to do, that they had to apply in order to hold that position, and also the pain that caused, the burn in the bicep that caused, and then the length of time, the duration that they were able to hold that position. But alongside this, what we did is we built a virtual reality environment. So once they were doing that exercise, what they actually saw was a computerized image of themselves and the dumbbell that they were holding. So this was all a computerized image of that person saw. Now, the trick here is that what we did is in the virtual reality environment, so in the fake environment, we made the weight that they were lifting either look much heavier than it was in reality or much lighter than it was in reality. So, for example, in real life, if they were lifting 10 kilograms, what they would actually see in the virtual reality environment is a weight that either looked 8 kilograms or 12 kilograms. Now, the interesting thing in the results was that when the participants thought they were lifting a lighter weight, they felt much less pain, it required less effort, and their endurance performance improved by a significant amount. The opposite was the case when they thought they were lifting a much heavier weight. So these were really interesting findings, and what we think the study suggests is that if we were able to use VR to make exercise less uncomfortable, it could be used as an intervention perhaps to get more people into exercise, either them to start an exercise program or to maintain the program that they're on, simply because it would make the exercise feel less uncomfortable. Now, of course, there might be some other issues associated with overcoming this. It's perhaps not as simple as this study suggests, because firstly, I guess it might not be always practical to exercise with a headset on. So my third question to you is, what do you think some of the drawbacks might be to exercising with VR? So what might be the biggest drawback to exercising with a VR headset? Yeah, interesting on that. So yeah, I guess there might be an element of danger. You can't, if you've got your headset on, you can't see the physical environment about you. So potentially you might be tripping over things or walking into walls. Expensive, yeah, it is expensive. Definitely, though, the price of these are coming down. We actually used a Samsung phone for the VR tool that we used in this, which is basically like a high-end smartphone. So you don't need really posh, expensive VR equipment for this to work. And obviously exercising indoors, yeah, never going to be as fun as exercising outdoors. There's not much we can do about that for the moment. Okay, so on to the final study that I want to talk to you about today. And this involves a technology called transcranial direct current stimulation, or TDCS. Now, TDCS is a technology and a technique that involves passing a mild electrical current between two electrodes which are placed on the head. Now, when you pass that electrical current between the two electrodes, what happens is some of that current penetrates the skull and it changes the activity of the brain area underneath the electrode. So when you're stimulating a particular part of the brain, that area of the brain which has been stimulated will change in response to that stimulation. Now, TDCS has found its way into commercially available devices. And because different brain areas are associated with different behaviors, the suggestion is that this technology is essentially able to improve human function in a range of ways. So if you are able to identify a brain area which has a particular function, if you use TDCS to stimulate and increase the activity of that brain area, then you might expect the consequent function to be improved. So what we've done at Kent is quite a few studies in this particular area, but we've focused really on trying to improve physical performance by using TDCS. So the theory here is that basically the brain ultimately recruits the muscles that we use to exercise. And if we're able to improve the efficiency of the communication from the brain to the muscle, then it might allow us to either exercise harder or exercise for longer. Now, some of the work that we've done in our labs at Kent have basically shown exactly that, which is, essentially, if you stimulate an area of the brain called the motor cortex, which is kind of located at the top of the center of your head and down towards your ears, if you stimulate the motor cortex, it makes your sense of effort, so your rating of perceived exertion here, so your effort for a given exercise intensity feel less. So you can see on the TDCS condition here, less effort. And as a result of that exercise feeling less effortful, it improves our endurance performance. So people are basically able to hold an exercise intensity for a longer period of time, so their endurance performance is improved. So that's not always the case, but some of the studies that we've performed at Kent have shown that TDCS is able to enhance our endurance performance. But, and there's always a but, there's lots of potential limitations and problems associated with this. And one of these is that TDCS is really a bit of a blunt instrument. And often, if you're trying to stimulate one area of the brain, it often results in other areas also being activated. This is because TDCS isn't particularly focal, so you get kind of a spread of current and you don't really isolate one brain area. You actually hit lots of brain areas when you try and target a particular area. In addition to this, a single brain area is often responsible for multiple functions. So what this basically means is that suddenly it might be that when we apply TDCS, we might be trying to produce one outcome, but then we cause lots of other different effects that we might not necessarily want to cause. So to give you an example of this, the research studies that I've posted here on this slide, in these studies, they try to stimulate the same area of the brain, but the effects that they demonstrate, the outcomes from these studies, demonstrate anything from enhancing your working memory through to changing your moral judgment. So really quite different effects, which you might not know that you're doing to yourself. So there are some questions with this particular technology. And so the final question that I want to ask you today is, just because we can do something, just because we have the technology to do it, should that mean we actually go ahead and do it? So in the case of brain stimulation, should we really be messing around with our brains when we really don't know what the outcomes to that might possibly be? Okay, yeah, so interesting responses on that. So it seems to be quite adverse about everybody having access to this technology, which is interesting because, as I've said, there's commercially available devices that you, as a member of the public, you can go away and buy it. To help people with health conditions, I mean, that's really how TDCS came about. And there's perhaps a bit more success in showing that this is an intervention which is able to help some clinical populations. So particularly things like depression, recovery from stroke, chronic pain is a nice example as well. So yeah, this might be something which is better suited or better applied to clinical populations. In terms of the dangers, the suggestion is that it's safe, but that is when its use is regulated. There's not so much information about people using this outside of well-regulated lab environment. And in terms of ethics, yeah, I guess that is something to be debated. So as a final slide for this presentation this evening, I want to try and bring this all back to what it means for our students, for our undergraduate students at Kent. Now, first and foremost, in our current degree programs that we offer within the School of Sport and Exercise Sciences, we have interdisciplinarity built in. Now, sport and exercise sciences, by its very nature, is interdisciplinary. But as I've hopefully shown you today, there are lots of other areas that you can go into, that you can collaborate with as a sport and exercise scientist, which perhaps gets you into avenues and directions that perhaps you've never even thought about. So to give you some examples from our current degree, our students can take a year in industry, and working in industry might really open your eyes to lots of different pathways that you might want to take. You can also take a year in data analytics, for example, or a year in journalism, and lots of other kind of embedded years within your program to basically expose you to a different discipline and hopefully allow you to find some synergies between these different disciplines and sports science. Now, hopefully the presentation that I've shown has given you 4 examples where different areas like data analytics and pharmacy and digital engineering and neuroscience can all be joined with sport and exercise sciences to create a, a really interesting direction that perhaps you might not have seen as something that would have been possible. Now, secondly, we're really excited as a school because from September 2021, we're going to be based at the Canterbury campus. And that's going to put us in much closer proximity to lots of other schools within the University of Kent, where we can have some really valuable and interesting and exciting collaborations with. And as with so many things, the easier that something is, the more that it's going to happen. So I think this interdisciplinary activity that I've hopefully shown you in this particular presentation, we're going to see more and more of that when the school moves to Canterbury. So we're very excited by that. Now, finally, as the Future Human research theme grows and gets embedded and operationalized within the university, it's also going to develop lots of learning and teaching opportunities for undergraduates. And I realize I've talked a lot about research in this presentation, but I think that's important because it's the research which really feeds into the curriculum about what you learn. And in terms of wider opportunities outside of your specific degree, lots of those opportunities are brought about by the research that a university does. So hopefully I've given you some exciting examples where there are opportunities to get involved. But as I've said, as Future Human continues to grow and really gets embedded within the university, the theme is going to help deliver things like optional modules that you can add to your degree program and are going to be specifically related to topics within Future Human. The theme is also going to help support work placements in this area as well. So we're going to try and link with businesses and industry in this particular area and offer those placements to students. And also the theme is going to provide some paid summer internships for undergraduates to work in a research environment and support activity that's being done by our staff and our postdocs in our research labs as well. So it'll provide a paid opportunity for our undergrads to really kind of get involved with some of this cutting edge research that I've talked about this evening. So I'm really excited by this. I think the opportunities that are going to come about as a result of Future Human can have a real impact on our students. And this is something that it's going to be really truly unique to Kent. And I think it's a very exciting time to be a student at the university. So with that, I'm going to say a big thank you for listening. Thank you for coming along this evening. And I think I've left about 15 minutes at the end of the presentation now to hopefully try and answer any questions that you might have. Right, I've just stopped sharing my screen, so give me a minute to get the Zoom window back up and turn my camera on. Okay, I hope that was interesting. Does anybody have any questions at all?
Lex, while we're just perhaps waiting for some questions to come in, and please use the Q&A function, which you'll find on your screen to post those. We'll keep an eye on that. Lex, I mean, obviously, we're all working under very different conditions now, and that's a fairly recent change. How do you think that's going to kind of impact upon areas of research in the kind of Future Human area that you're currently working in? You know, some of the things you were saying, it almost seems like these areas need to be kind of speeded up or emphasized based upon the way people are living at the moment. But how do you see it going?
Yeah, I mean, I think the last the last 11 or 12 months has really been a massive learning curve for everybody, and I think it's another great example of this kind of rapid evolution of something that has been probably pretty static for quite a long time. In terms of kind of teaching delivery at the university and at all universities, that was very much focused on face-to-face work, and that hasn't changed, I guess, for a long time. but the pandemic has kind of enforced this different mode of delivery, and there's some clear advantages to working in this way. We've had to embed it quite quickly, and so we're learning a lot with doing it, but there's also some advantages of doing that. And I think delivering a live lecture on Zoom with PowerPoint slides and interactive questions is perhaps something that we wouldn't have considered 12 months ago. So I think that kind of rapid response to an external challenge really kind of drives innovation, and that is that can be a kind of a good thing coming out of a pretty horrible situation. I think in terms of what that looks like for research, I mean, research has been impacted quite heavily by the pandemic. It's been quite challenging to undertake research in these conditions, and I think I alluded to that in the WADA tramadol study that I talked about, where we have people in the lab exercising really hard. That creates what's called an aerosol generating procedure, where we have suspended droplets, which if someone is infected, then that can be a challenge to keep people safe. So responding to that and making sure that our participants and our research assistants are safe in these conditions has required some work. And I think that the fact that this research is still going on, despite the external environment, is a real credit to the university and everyone working within it, that shows a commitment to being able to deliver that work, which is really important.
Yeah, and you kind of alluded to the importance of sport and exercise for health, and I think that's become even more acute with the current pandemic in terms of how it impacts on people's mental and physical well-being. So I'd like to introduce a couple of our current students that we've dragged along this evening. We've got Megan and we've got Karis. Megan is a final year student on our sports science program, and Karis is a final year student on our sport, exercise and health program. My name's Steve Meadows. I'm the admissions tutor for the school. So if you have any questions relating to the presentation or any general admissions related questions, we'll be happy to deal with those this evening. But I'd just like to kind of give them a chance to contribute to the proceedings here. So Megan, I'll go to you first of all. What decided your choice on Kent? What was a sort of defining factor for you coming to Kent? And perhaps tell us a little bit about how things were as a first year student for you. And don't forget to unmute your mic. Well done.
So I kind of think I chose Kent for a few reasons. It was close to home, so it meant that I could easily get back within like an hour, and that was quite important for me, just to be close to my family. And then also I think they had good module choices, and kind of it was the areas that I was looking to study. So I was kind of looking for more physiology and science based, and other courses didn't have the same variety of the modules. And then kind of as a first year, it was kind of a general learning of everything. So in first year, there was no optional modules in the first 2 years for science. And so it was kind of that learning about all the different areas like biomechanics, physiology, psychology, kind of areas that you don't look at as much in your A levels, like they're only briefly touched on. And so, yeah, that was kind of what it was like. I think as well, it was quite relatively easy to settle in because there was lots of kind of events and that sort of thing. So,
yeah, great, thanks. And Karis, you're on the sport, exercise and health program. So what made you decide to study that in particular? Because the tradition is sports science, that's been around for a long time. But why did you select sport and exercise for health as a degree to study?
Well, I loved sport anyway. I knew I wanted to go into that kind of area, but I just had no idea what I really enjoyed at that point. And looking at the health course, there was no other university that kind of offered that wide variety of modules, because I still kind of hadn't made up my mind yet whether I enjoyed the physiology side of things or the rehabilitation side of things. So the health course was a really good option for me, and I've been able to tailor it to my things I enjoy, so it's really been helpful.
What things do you particularly enjoy about your degree?
I love that I could pick my modules in my second year and my third year, so that's been really good. And I've been able to do more injury side of things. I didn't realise that I'd be able to do that in my first year, but studying sports injuries and sports rehab things, practical side of things like massage and recovery, they've been really, really, really good.
Okay. And Megan, if I can come back to you, I mean, obviously this is a strange time to be doing anything, but as a student, how have you found it being at university for this final year so far?
Yeah, it's certainly been really different. Like obviously first and second year, it's like you go to your lectures in person, you have seminars and you're all in the same room. So I suppose it's been a bit different, but I think it's worked actually quite well. There's definitely some advantages to it. Kind of that being able to continue learning relatively normally. You've still got your lectures and you've still got your seminars, but also kind of being able to do it from home has been really useful. Kind of especially as we're in a pandemic, but I think it's kind of just worked, and you've actually got to learn a little bit more about it because you can see the things that can actually be done a little bit easier than before. Yeah, and I think it's helped with like more independent learning as well. Like it's kind of, especially as a third year, you're looking to kind of go out next year and hopefully into work or a master's or that sort of thing. So it's kind of really helped like with the independent learning side of stuff. Yeah. Not sure that completely answered your question, but there you go.
I think, yeah, you did. I mean, a question to both of you. What advice would you give to anyone thinking about university? Because obviously this kind of talk is aimed at perhaps people in their final year at school, studying A-levels, BTECs, or international baccalaureate qualifications. What advice would you give someone who's considering applying for university? Karis, do you want to maybe cast your mind back?
I would say just go for it, because I think a lot of people look at university and have a lot of doubts about it, but I think you just got to put yourself out there and kind of accept every opportunity that comes your way. It's always going to be a learning experience and you're always going to grow from it, so and learn from it. So I think it is a good choice.
Okay, good. What about you, Megan? What advice would you give to people thinking about university?
I think, yeah, the same as Karen's, kind of just do it. Look at all the courses that you're thinking of applying to, and kind of, yeah, it's kind of exactly what you want. And I suppose if you're thinking about doing something in sport and exercise science or in sports science, it's definitely worth applying for. And if you're not exactly sure what you want, there is always kind of a chance to explore what you kind of want to do after, and gives you that much broader range of knowledge about sport. Yeah, I would just give it a go.
And again, to kind of anyone considering university, do you have to be good at sport to study sports science, or sport and exercise for health, or sports therapy is another option that we have on our degree programs?
I would say no, you just got to have an interest in it. Obviously having a sporting background is useful. I personally don't do any sport myself, and I haven't really found an issue with the course, so I wouldn't say it's a requirement that you have to be an athlete, but having an interest in the subject is really important, because that means that you're going to enjoy it and get more out of the course.
Yeah. And what things
I agree.
Yeah, what things do you think you've kind of really learned, being at university? What things have really stood out for you as being sort of, I guess, key moments in your learning journey at university? Well, there's a reflective question.
Take a little time to think about that one.
Yeah. Key moments.
What about you, Karis? Would you say that applicants have to be good at sport to study sport and exercise science?
No, I don't think you have to be good at sport. There are loads of sports that I'm rubbish at, but just to have that interest, and even because I do a couple of sports but not at a competitive level or elite level at all, I think it does help a little bit if maybe you do a little bit of sport, even at the gym, because then you kind of understand what you're doing as well. I think that's always helpful. And you can kind of apply that knowledge practically as well.
When you selected sports science as a course before you came to Kent, did you have an idea about what you wanted to do as a career? And if you did, has that changed in the 2 or 3 years since you've studied?
To be honest, I had no idea, and I think now I kind of have an idea. I want to go into rehabilitation and massage and things like that. But before uni, I didn't even know that was a thing. I had no idea about that. So it's been really good to kind of open my eyes and know all of the things that are out there. There's such a wide variety of things out there that I didn't even know about.
I would say, yeah, I kind of did think I roughly had an area that I wanted to go into. I kind of wanted to go into research a little bit, but I wasn't really sure what area, and I kind of wanted to do that practical lab work. And I think now, actually having done the course, I've kind of changed my mind a little bit. I still want to do that kind of research, but actually I want to work with patients and participants kind of from a more of a health point of view rather than just a science point of view. So kind of finding ways to use exercise to improve health or kind of prevent disease.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing actually, because one of the things I was thinking about, Lex, while you were giving your talk, is that, you know, often to sort of, I guess, for humans to fulfill their potential, often it's kind of rediscovering things that we've forgotten, or, you know, have stopped doing, and, you know, rediscovering some of those things, like, you know, just using exercise as a means of rehabilitation, or to maybe offset some of the effects of aging and things like that. So it's not necessarily brand new things. It may just be rediscovering some things that we've, you know, through our kind of lifestyles, we've maybe forgotten about, and factoring those and programming those things in again.
I didn't think I'd kind of be learning about that side of it at uni. And so it's really interesting that in my second kind of year that we started talking about it, and then in third year that we have that exercise prescription module. That kind of is completely different in some respects to the things that we'd already been doing. It's not that kind of deep science. It's actually about how to use exercise for people, and that's something I didn't expect to get out of the course, but something that I definitely now know that I want to go into. So it's been really valuable.
You kind of answered that question I posed to you earlier, then, haven't you, in terms of defining moments? You've discovered things you didn't know existed, and I think that's one thing university provides, is that those opportunities and opens up those possibilities to you. Great. Any final tips for our prospective applicants?
So don't be afraid. Like, kind of go for, if you're thinking about doing something, just go for it, because you've not really got anything to lose. You're only going to kind of discover if you're really interested in that or not. And yeah, some of the things that you don't expect can be the things that are the most important.
Okay.
That's a good point, definitely. I think, again, just go for it, because if you don't, you're always going to think, oh, what would happen if I would have done that? It's always going to be the what if. So just do it and then you'll know. So definitely just go for it.
Exactly.
Great, thank you. Lex, have you got any final wise words for our audience?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're interested in something, it's always worth asking the question. You know, as a school, as a department, we're always here to help and provide as much information as we can for you. And, you know, if you think you're not getting the right information or you can't access it, then, you know, reach out and speak to someone. You're always going to be able to have a better conversation and find out more if you actually speak to someone, rather than kind of wading through tons and tons of different websites and trying to find that somewhere. So if in doubt, speak to someone and get some advice.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. And thanks again for giving your talk.
It's a pleasure.
Lex, good. Thank you also, Caris and Megan, for joining us. Your contribution is always valuable. And if you want to know any more about the School of Sport and Exercise Science, please just look us up, just Google us at Ken, and we have our own webpage. We'll keep you up to date with things that are going on, particularly things relating to our move. So thanks very much for joining us. I don't think there's any questions. Yeah, no, I think we're done with all the questions. So stay safe, everyone. And there's more talks like this being held by our division. We've got another one coming up next week, next Wednesday evening, where Kira DeConnick will be presenting one of her passions and relating to the research she's doing. So please join us then. Emails will be sent out with those invitations and Zoom links. So do come along and join us. Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening and stay safe.